listener production.
Hey, Bension here with The Briefing.
We will pursue our manifest destiny into the stars, launching American astronauts to plant the stars and stripes on the planet Mars.
That was Donald Trump in his first speech back as president, claiming American astronauts will be planting an American flag on Mars. I mean, sure, but what about an Australian flag? People forget now, but in 2019, then PM Scott Morrison committed $150 million taxpayer dollars to get Australia a better seat at the table for Project Artemis. The NASA mission to first send humans back to the moon, second, set up a permanent human base on the moon, and third, get humans onto Mars. Australia may not have anything of the scale of NASA, but we do have a national space agency in Adelaide, of all places, and do not talk shit about my hometown. And we do have our very own astronaut. So could we see an Australian flag planted right next to the American one on the red planet in the next few years? And probably more important, is it even possible with the technology we have right now to keep a human alive long enough for the return trip? Dr. Rebecca Allen is co-director of the Space Technology and Industry Institute at Swinburne University of Technology. Dr. Allen, welcome back to The Briefing.
Great to be back.
What happens if we try and send humans to Mars using the technology that exists today?
Well, the trick with the technology we have today is it's simply not designed for this type of long-term human spaceflight. So that means things like the amount of radiation that astronauts would undergo, and even simply taking the supplies they need with them would be very challenging and pose immense risks.
Walk me through those challenges. What are the problems that we would have to overcome?
So I'll start from the human perspective. Just being in space, when we see astronauts on the International Space Station, even though they are above the Earth, they are in space, they're still protected by the Earth's magnetic field. And this is really, really important because our magnetic field is what keeps the nasty particles from space, the radiation from space, and our sun from impacting us. And when we look at Mars, we can see that it doesn't have atmosphere. We know it barely has any magnetic field. And so just traveling through space where we're not protected and then going to a planet where that doesn't exist means that we're going to be exposed to much higher levels of radiation. In fact, the European Space Agency has investigated this, and they say that astronauts could undergo hundreds of times the amount of radiation on their journey to Mars that they would from being on Earth. So it's really, really risky. And then you think about what do humans need to survive? We need water and we need food. So simply carrying that much water right now wouldn't really work because water is heavy. And so we would have to have a way to not just, as NASA's done in the past, reclaim our own water, but really to be able to get that supply. So understanding how would we have water and then food. So what would we eat on this journey? And there's been a lot of research done on the International Space Station looking at growing our own food. And that still remains a challenge just to grow the most basic crops. So I think those are really the three kind of fundamental things in terms of the human perspective. And then you need the vehicle that's going to get you there. So Apollo, the Saturn V, that was designed to take people to the moon. And so it had a very specific purpose. Now, when we look to the launch vehicles of today, the Starship is incredible, the SpaceX Starship, because what it's looking to do is not just one task. It's supposed to be multi-purpose. So that's fantastic. But at the same time, that means you have to adapt something which could be used for taking astronauts into low Earth orbit or to the moon, or then even looking at beyond to Mars. In any other kind of vehicle, you have to look at what is designed today, what it can carry, and then what are the requirements to go this extremely vast distance.
So in summary, we don't have the spaceship yet that can do it. And if we did have the spaceship, we don't know how to stop those humans from being killed effectively by the radiation.
Yes. So I think those are the major fundamentals here. And we know, that we've sent payloads, we've sent rovers, we've sent landers, we've even flown a copter on Mars. So we can get things there, but it's just about that next step of taking human beings. We're needy creatures. We evolved to live on this planet. So when you take us off of that, you're basically trying to keep us alive the entire time. So I think we're edging closer, but I think it's really ambitious to aim for Mars at this stage.
There is, however, already something, the Moon to Mars program called Artemis. The Australian government spent something like $150 million on it under Prime Minister Scott Morrison. Where is that up to now, and what is our involvement?
Great question. So first of all, I'll say any kind of human space travel at this point, even going back to the moon, this is a global effort. And so what I think has been really fantastic to see, over the last 5-6 years is that Australia is recognizing that it has a role to play in humanity's return to space. And so some of the key things about the Moon to Mars program are looking at things like Australia's building its first lunar rover. That's probably one of the most recent significant announcements is the space agency chose the organization, including universities and industry that will work across Australia to develop that rover. And what's important about that rover is it's going to be designed to help look for water on the moon. And again, I just mentioned how important of a resource water is. And so that's a great step. Going to the moon, creating that base and seeing how we're going to get these critical resources. And it ties back into Australia's history of mining and resource extraction and actually utilizing that for space. But there's a lot of other elements to the Moon to Mars program. And a lot of that is actually focused on Australia doesn't have a burgeoning space industry. So just fundamentally investing in startups, investing in research to explore different capabilities and build them. So things like building racking systems. So if you want to put a payload on a rocket, something's got to hold that payload and something's got to ensure that that experiment or those supplies do what they're meant to do. So even this kind of fundamental technology, there's been a lot of investment in that.
We obviously don't have anything of the scale of NASA, but we do train astronauts here and we do have a space agency. Donald Trump says that he wants to put the American flag on Mars in the next 4 years. Could we see an Australian flag right next to it with an Australian astronaut setting the flag?
Well, I can tell you, it's really amazing when I get to speak with a lot of our students and even people who are interested in going to space, and just students coming up and the sheer number of them that say, I want to be an astronaut. Can I be an astronaut if I'm in Australia? And I think now, the answer to that question is yes. We've seen Catherine Benalpeg, who's been able to undertake her astronaut training for the European Space Agency. And so she's a fully fledged astronaut candidate. She could get on a flight tomorrow to the International Space Station if we were able to support that. I think the main thing is that it takes a lot of funding. Okay. You think about training a human being to understand and be able to undertake those operations to perform the space flight, and then all of the supplies and everything that's needed to help them survive. So it's really an investment in that human space program. And so I think the answer is absolutely yes, we could.
Envision, say, that Trump is right and humanity manages to get humans onto Mars in the next 4 years. What would that look like? What would we have to do to be able to do that?
We're sitting here in 2025 and we're thinking about Mars. And I actually think it's probably similar going back to when we were thinking about, the Apollo program and people saying, you really think that you're going to be able to put people on the moon? And just seeing what had to happen for the Apollo program to translate from a test, testing and just getting humans into orbit versus surviving that trip to the moon and the amount of time that was done in. So it's definitely possible. But I think in the next 4 years, if we are able to get people to Mars, it's not going to be, this luxurious sci-fi experience that we see. If you watch, for example, For All Mankind, the TV show, there's a lot of interesting similarities there in the history of what could happen. But really, I think it's going to be more of a simple, basic survival and the fundamental technology that we see. And even though humans have really advanced in our journey into space, space is still extremely challenging. Space is hard. And so, essentially what we would see is something like Starship, where you've got an upper stage that can really double as your landing vehicle and potentially where astronauts would reside and then come out and some sort of very basic kind of rover habitation. again, The Martian, the movie, that's even that is probably beyond what we would see, something where we're looking more towards, the Eagle, the Apollo, the very basic kind of landing craft. And I would say astronauts would probably have very limited exposure kind of going out of that spacecraft to explore the Martian environment, because there's just still so much we don't understand about the fundamental Martian environment, even though the rovers, landers, all of the amazing satellites that have gathered a tremendous amount of data. The deepest we've ever dug onto Mars, it's not even a very deep hole. So I think, there's just a lot that we still don't know.
You mentioned SpaceX, and we cannot ignore Elon Musk in this. It seems very obvious this is a gift from Donald Trump to Elon Musk, more or less personally. Elon always says that we have to become an interplanetary species for the sake of the future of humanity. But Mars kind of sucks in terms of living on it. Gets down to incredibly low temperatures. It is barren. Give me the sell of why we should send people there at all.
Oh my gosh, I am, and everybody will laugh because I'm the person like, would you ever go to space? And I'm like, no, let the robots do it. Honestly, I'm happy for those little robots to continue exploring Mars. But I think at the same time, I will say that from the perspective of, do we want to answer fundamental questions like, was there ever life on Mars? Could there still be microbial life? Those are questions that we can only answer with human astronauts. Even with all of our advanced technology, we still will not be able to really answer that question in the same depth and capacity as if we have scientists and experts there exploring in real time, able to go back and analyze interesting sites. So I do think for us, and a kind of fundamental understanding of our place in the solar system, looking at how life started on planets, and even understanding our own journey on Earth, I do think that it's really important. And one thing, we talk about something, being for Elon Musk or for his company. At the same time, if we look at the Apollo program, all of the, technological innovations that come from addressing the impossible challenge of taking humans off Earth and helping them survive off-world, that can do tremendous things for our planet if we look at a lot of the returns from the Apollo program. So I will say in a positive light, there's going to be some incredible technological advances that will come out of this. And it's hard to say exactly what those are right now. So I can understand a lot of the kind of criticism and even cynicism around that. But I do think that it is something which will really provide us with a lot of actually really valuable scientific information as well as technological advances for people back on Earth.
But if you take Elon Musk at his word, and we're talking about like making a second planet for the sake of human habitation into the future, is that plausible for you?
Actually, I'll go back and I will say, I'm more of the Carl Sagan state of mind that the planet we have is pretty great. And so I think that the world that we have right now is that we should be investing, and space can really do that as well with Earth observation, with monitoring our climate, that there's a lot that we should be focusing on our own world, because this is where the majority of people will be. And if Mars ever does become a second place for humans, it will not be the majority of humanity that gets to take that journey. We are Earthlings. This is where we started, and this is our original home. And so I do think that just looking at going off to another world as a solution is not one that I would necessarily say is the solution. I think you have to think about it beyond that. It's not black and white. So I say, let's work on this planet at the same time.
That's a great place to end. Rebecca Allen, thanks so much for joining us again on The Briefing.
Absolutely.
Dr. Rebecca Allen there. She's the co-director of the Space Technology and Industry Institute at Swinburne University of Technology. That's it for this episode of The Briefing. We would love it if you could share this app with someone you think might enjoy it. If you want to keep up with our other content, you can always check us out on Instagram at The Briefing Podcast, and on TikTok and YouTube. Search Listener Newsroom. We'll be back in your feed tomorrow morning from 6. I'm Bension Siebert. Catch you next time.